you know, addiction can be an all-consuming thing, whether it's for yourself or you have a loved one that has it. But today in this video, we're going to talk about how to take your own power, your own joy back from addiction so that it's not in control, but you're in control. And to do that, we have a guest speaker, as I like to call them, expert witness with us. We have Pam Lanhart. She is from the Thrive Parent Support Group. And she's here to share with us her techniques and methods on how to get back in control, how to take your power back, and not let addiction just suck every ounce of your joy out. You got a tall order here, Pam. This is a big order for you to fill.
It really is. And, at the same time, I don't know anybody who wouldn't say, oh yeah, I really want to get my joy back. I really want to get my power back. And I think everyone feels, and before we get really deep into this, I just want to validate and acknowledge that I don't talk about this without personal experience. I have personal experience as a mother of a son who's in recovery. And I don't talk about this flippantly to not validate the pain and the suffering for family members, whether you're a spouse or a parent, or maybe you are an adult that has a parent that is suffering and struggling with substance use. But what I learned in my experience was that I did have power and I did have choices.
Right. And you were telling me a minute ago, Pam, you were telling me you used an old movie reference called The Blob. I really like that. Will you share that with us?
Well, I'm kind of showing my age because I think that was a movie in the 60s, right? So I often share an analogy of this movie called The Blob. And if you haven't ever watched it, you can probably look it up on YouTube. But it was this parasitical blob that would just eat up everything in its path, right? So, and as it ate whatever it was in front of him, it would grow. So it started out as this little thing, and by the end of the movie, it was just, consuming a whole city. And so it would just grow and grow and grow. And I really think of addiction like that, where it's very parasitical. It's like the addiction, if we remove, and just think of it as its own little entity, it wants to devour everything. Like the addiction wants to devour, and that's what gives it power. So it's clicking along, and it's obviously consumed our loved one, and now it's going to attack, and it's going to attack family members and friends and people in the community. And so as we give up our power to the addiction, it grows and it consumes our family. And so what I know for myself personally is that I had to stop feeding it, and I had to stop giving it its power. And right. I know we talked about like that idea of powerlessness, and I never felt that way. I never felt like I was powerless. I always, even early on, thought I am not powerless. I do have choices. There are things that I can do.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of, and I do know the movie The Blob, just so you know, but there's a game that I play. I don't play many games on my phone, but there's one. It's called Holes. If you guys are watching, y'all tell me if you know. And it's like this big sinkhole. And as you play, you suck more stuff in, and it gets bigger until you're like sucking in giant like buildings and cities or whatever. And the whole thing is like to be the biggest sinkhole or whatever. But that's what it's like. And that is, you're so right on target when you say that about addiction. It has to be fed to stay alive. And I think the key to learning how to beat addiction, this isn't even just about how to keep your joy, but about how to beat addiction is stop feeding it. It's a parasite, and it needs certain things in order to grow, and it consumes everything the person has pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And so then, even though it's inside the person, it needs to feed off of the family and the friends and the coworkers. And so when you stop being a source for that, then not only are you starving out the addiction, but you're making a decision not to let it suck you into the blob or the sinkhole or however you want to think about it. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that?
Yeah. And I had gotten sucked in, and some of you watching might be sitting in your chair right now thinking, I am completely consumed. And I remember for us, it was my son was really young when he started using substances. He was like 12. He went to his first treatment program when he was 15. And I just remember like that moment, sitting on my chair. And there were days when I just wouldn't be able to even function normally or properly. And I hear this all the time with family members that I'm stressed, I'm gaining weight, I'm not moving, I can't show up for work, I can't show up for my other family members. And I was there, I was in that space, sobbing, just like, how am I going to do this? And, there was a moment when I remember thinking to myself, okay, addiction is taking my son, but I am not going to let addiction get the 2-for-1 special.
I love it. Right. That's right.
So like there was sort of this moment of awareness where, you kind of think about the movie Mr. Mom's another movie I talk about. That's where Mike Keaton, right? And he's gaining weight and he feels like a slug and, his house is a mess. And all of a sudden one morning he's like, I'm done. And I am done. And he put on his little like Superman cape and he started changing his attitude and changing the way he was interacting with his family. And he just made a decision. And, I don't know if I can tell you exactly what led up to that decision, except that I knew that my relationships were suffering. I knew that my physical health was suffering. I knew that, my friendships were suffering, because who wants to be around Debbie Downer?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to be around Youre?
Right.
And I kind of have a Tigger personality anyway. So it was like, wow, this was really stealing a lot of things from my own life and harming a lot of my relationships because, I was in that victim place. I was like Michael Keaton, feeling sorry for myself, feeling like a martyr, feeling like I was powerless. And, of course, you put out energy, right? You put out this energy to the people around you. And that sort of perpetuates the isolation. And,
right.
One thing I mentioned, it perpetuates the guilt and the shame that we put on our loved ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know, even though sometimes I know like you might feel when they're in active use that they can't grasp, that what's going on around them. They can't. They really can't.
Oh, they definitely can. Right. And you were saying that earlier, and I thought that was so interesting because you were like, the more you're like that, the more guilt and shame you're putting onto them. But the thing of it is what actually happens, it really is guilt and shame on the inside. But when you're acting depressed or angry or like Eeyore, psychologically what they do with that is they become mad at you, right? And then they don't even care. And then that helps them not even care that they're hurting you, right? Mm-hmm. And so what they do is it's like this like way that they combat that bad feeling is like, oh my gosh, she's such a nag. She's such a pain. Like, who cares? Mm-hmm. And if you stop, I call that the being the bad guy role. Like if you stop doing that, then they actually feel the real pain of the fact that they're hurting you. When you just step out of the way, it's there. And that actually will cause people to change for the better, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you're talking about the day you became aware, I'm hurting myself, I'm hurting everybody around me, and then you made a decision. It's a very, very parallel process for the addicted person, right? So everything that Pam is telling you, not only is it what you need to do for yourself, it's what you need to do for your entire family.
Right. And I don't know that I've ever met anybody in recovery who has not indicated that their family started to make some changes first. Right. And so we need to lead the way with what I call our personal recovery. Right. Mm-hmm. And when you think of recovery, what it means really defined is a return to wellness, you're returning to something that you lost. And so as I'm sitting on that chair in my living room, my relationships are suffering, my health is suffering, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is great loss. And I'm sure many of you watching can probably name a list of all the things that you personally have lost because of your loved one's substance use, right? And I was like, I need to stop this right now. I need to stop experiencing these losses. I want to return to my health and well-being. And we know that what that does in our brain is it, reduces the amount of stress hormones, it produces endorphins, and then it gives us this great sense of peace. So now all of a sudden our energy is changing, right? What we're putting out there is different. And the addiction is confused.
It will respond to that, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like, it's the craziest thing. Sometimes I think about it in session. The energy, who's controlling the energy, right? Is the addiction controlling the energy, or you're going to control it? And even when I have people struggling with addiction, they come and they sit on my couch. I have to be mindful about that sinkhole, that energy, because it'll suck me in. No matter how many years of training and experience, it can get me in. It's almost like being like controlling and being like, no, I'm going to be the alpha energy here, right? Like I'm going to set the tone. I'm going to set the energy. And when you hold steady like that, it'll conform, but it's so easy to get sucked into.
Well, and it's what we know is that it can work that way in the negative, but it can also work in the positive, right? So like what I know in my own life is that when I decided to get my life back, which was when my son was about 16 or 17. And, I remember sitting in front of an advisor one day, and he just said, we can be right in our principles and ideas and being totally wrong in our way of being towards other people.
Oh my goodness,
right?
yes.
And so for me, this was really about, how do I want to show up for my family? How do I want to show up for my son? How do I want to show up for the other people in my life, my living parents who needed me, for our friends in our community? And what I knew was that A, I wasn't even showing up at all, because I was like, I didn't want to leave my house. But B, when I did, how it's like, who wants to be around that, And I didn't like myself. I didn't like my way of being. And so I just had to make that decision in that moment where I was gonna change. And I see this so often in families, it just is painful and it's all consuming. But when parents or spouses, I think about, especially with spouses, how, easy it is. Women tend to want to mother, control and manipulate. And we're really good at that in the addiction as well. And so when we go back to what can we control and what power do we have? Right?
Absolutely. And you were telling me earlier, Pam, about, for you, it almost happened like in an instant, like there was a moment in time. So tell us a little bit about that, because some people say it was gradual. It's just like recovery. Sometimes people get recovery, like from addiction all at once. And then other times it's more gradual. But for you, it was like a moment.
Yeah. And I remember my son was 16 and he had been through a couple treatment programs. And, we were at this place with his substance use where we couldn't force him to go to a treatment program. Not that would be a good idea anyway, if you're listening. Bad idea. And we were trying to engage him, but he's 16, right? So he's figured out that like, oh, I'm the boss of me. I don't have to do what you tell me to do. And yet his substance use was bad enough where we were actually really afraid he would die. Of course, that's a really, really difficult place to be. I know many of you are in that place right now where you're like, he could die. And so for me, it was this part of that process and part of that moment was, and if he died, what would that last day look like? What would that last moment would look like? How would I look back? And what would I have lost along with him? I was dying with my son. And I was like, no, this is not what my family needs. This is not what is good for me. And for me, I have a faith, and I was like, this is what God wouldn't want of me. I wasn't doing anything meaningful or purposeful in my life at that time because I was so consumed by what was going on. And you know how it is too, like it's all you talk about. And you know, the husband,
wear everybody around you out. You wear them out. Yeah.
my husband would come home from work and he would tell you now he didn't even want to come home because it was like he didn't know what he was going to be getting into. So like there was this sort of, you know, pivotal moment where I was it was like Mr. Mom in that movie, you know, where Michael Keaton's just made that decision in a moment. And that for me it was really more like a moment where I knew that I was not living the life that I was meant to be living.
Right.
Because we are not meant to live in that place of, you know, suffering. And while suffering is sometimes what happens, how we respond, which is what, you know, it's what we talk about all the time, right? In your videos and with recovery, like it's not about what happens to us. It's about how we respond to what's happening around us.
That's right. And even though for you, it kind of happened in a moment where you made a decision. My guess is that you'd been simmering with those thoughts for a while of becoming more and more aware of what it was doing to you and how it was affecting you. You made the decision all in one moment, but it was probably, my guess, a little bit of a buildup. And also my guess is, you can tell me if I'm wrong, Pam, but it's a decision that you have to make again and again and again, right?
Right. Well, change isn't linear. You know, when we talk about this, when we talk about ambivalence and stages of change and how, you know, we want something, but then sometimes it's hard, you know, to actually act on that. And how do we move forward? And we'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And, you know, that's definitely just our humanness, right? We're just human beings who, but I think for me, I do have a tendency to be pretty dogmatic and determined. So it was a decision and it was a choice. And once I made that choice, I was like, okay, I need to revisit that every single day. You know, how am I going to show up in a way that honors, you know, the people around me and that honors my son, right? So.
And I like that you said show up, because it's a choice, but then that choice becomes an action.
Right.
And the action is what will actually make the feeling better. We have somebody in the comments. I'm going to put it up here. Gina says, how can you do that when you're in utter despair? Which is a completely fair question, Gina. The thing of it is it's a choice that you make to get out of despair, and then next comes the action. You decide to act differently. A lot of people, and we talk about this in counseling a lot, they say, when I feel differently, I'll do differently. You know, when I'm not depressed, I'll go to the mall with my friends or whatever. But you have to get up and do the thing for the feeling to change.
You know, years ago, I worked for Dale Carnegie Training, and there's a little saying that he says, act enthusiastic and you'll be enthusiastic.
That's right.
So the verb comes first and the feelings follow. And I just want to speak to the utter despair. And I'm so sorry that you're in that place right now. And I honor that. And it is really, really hard. And for me too, it was, where do I get my hope from? You know, where do I find that hope? And I want to tell you that it was the recovery community that was my primary source of, I would look to people who had stories that were 100 times worse than my son's, and they were in recovery. So aside from, of course, for me, faith, which was very important, it was more like, who are the people out there that are doing it, right? And looking also to those family members, the mothers and the fathers and the spouses that were living their life in spite of the difficulties, and not just in substance use, but we can apply that to any other, you know, you see people whose loved ones have cancer or are living with disabilities. There are many mothers in our organization that have kids with severe disabilities, and they're like every day they get up and they show up and they are filled with joy because they choose that instead of looking at the despair and the deaths, we can look at like the death statistics, right? When we hear those a lot right now, there's Dope Sick is the new movie on Hulu, and a lot of people are watching it, and it's pretty depressing and pretty discouraging. So like I would say, get yourself out of that place where you're looking at the negative and figure out for yourself where you can find that hope. Who can you look to? What can you look to? So that you're not always feeding your spirit with the negative.
Right. You can control the influences you allow. And that what Pam's talking about is you can control the people you put yourself around, the things you watch on TV, the things you listen to. You can, to a large degree, control the thoughts that you listen to. You decide whether to entertain those thoughts. The thought can pop in there, the negative one, and you decide how far down the rabbit hole you want to go with that. Mm-hmm. And if you're really just stuck in, Campbell calls it the trough, like what Gina's talking about, if you're really in it and you can't just, you're not ready to have that one moment like Pam's talking about, what you can say is, you know what, I'm going to go to this one event I've been invited to. And for this event, I'm just going to enjoy myself. Maybe you can make a little decision, right? To allow yourself to have a moment. And then maybe another moment.
Right. There's an app my daughter just downloaded called Fabulous, and it's how do I change little small habits every single day. So, maybe for today it's I'm going to get up and drink my water. I'm going to go take my dog for a walk. I think music is like really super powerful. So I'm going to put on a song that that lifts my spirits, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to listen to something that is encouraging and life-giving. Really, there's a lot of podcasts that are super positive, so what, and here's the thing about that I believe about recovery is that it's very person-centered. Mm-hmm. And I believe in self-efficacy, right? So like, innately what those things are that will bring you back to your place of joy. And it's going to be different for every person, but ask yourself today, as you're listening to this, like, this is where I go with this is, what are things that I did before the addiction that I have given up and I have stopped doing because of the addiction? And start there, because those were the things that brought you joy and gave you energy and brought you peace. And we subtracted those. So I believe recovery is about addition. Mm-hmm. And it's about putting the positive things back in your bucket that you've taken out or let go of. And as we build up our positive recovery activities in our bucket, it pushes out the negative, right?
It sure does, right.
So
there's only so much room in there, right? And so if you're deciding what goes in, you can be in control of that. That's right. I love it. And sometimes you have to give yourself permission, right? Because sometimes it feels like it's somehow wrong,
right,
to feel good or to have fun or to go to an event. Can you speak to that at all, Pam?
Well, I think there's a saying that you're only as happy as your saddest child, right? And the truth is that I validate how hard it is. In my case, as a mother, when I see my son suffering, like that, there's a lot of pain in that. Now, I believe in this practice of mindfulness and radical acceptance. So like, feel that, right? We don't want to ignore that. We don't want to tiptoe around that. We want to work through it. And, hopefully you have a good therapist to help you with some of that. But on the other hand, we don't want to stay in that, and we don't want to live in that dark, depressing, sad place. And so for me, it was, okay, I acknowledged the hard stuff and I acknowledged the sadness, but like what we talked about, which is I knew that I pick up on other people's energy, and just like I pick up on other people's energy, other people pick up on mine. Mm-hmm. And so, what is that going to look like? And, we can set the tone. Mm-hmm. And then what's really cool oftentimes is the people around us match that.
That's right. And I like, it was so funny that you mentioned that saying, the saying, you're only as happiest as your most unhappy child. And because about a month ago, Campbell, we were working on her parent group, putting the things together, and she's like, that saying, I just hate that saying. I reject that. And it was just funny that you brought that up, because that's exactly what she said. That doesn't have to be the case. And it also reminds me of one of our somebody that watched one of our videos just this past week had left a comment, and they were basically talking about it. Obviously, it was like a mom, and she had several children, and one of the children was addicted, but the two other children were so angry about the addicted child, and she was upset with them because she's like, why won't they do the craft approach? Why won't they listen to the videos? And she was like upset at the two non-addicted children. And I'm like, oh man, this is what we're talking about when the energy starts, everybody's energy is pinging off each other, right?
Well, the other thing is that I believe that healing happens in safe places, right? And so, what does that mean to be a safe person? And if I'm looking to sort of assist my loved one or help them or guide them, or I want them to come to me when they do, listening for that change talk, and how do you even use some of those craft skills or change talk if you're not connecting in some way with your person? And why would they want to come and connect with you if you're Debbie Downer, if you're, again, that layer of guilt that it puts on them when, and the power that it gives them, like it, oftentimes they'll attack us. They'll, try to make us sad. And like you talk about, when we react to that, we put ourselves in that bad guy role where, now they have a reason to go use, right? Like, oh, my mom is, of course, they're not going to say this quite so nice, but I made my mom sad. Woe is me. I'll go, bury my emotions in a bottle of gin or whatever, right?
Translation is, I hate you. You're ruining my life. I'm doing what I want to do anyway, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite so nice. But like we're, again, like how awesome is it if we can step out of that role of giving them a reason to go use, right? Or to get mad or, whatever it is. So I'm like, I'm not going to be that reason. I'm not going to be that reason. And
you're not going to give it, you're not going to feed the addiction. You're not going to, I love what you said. I'm not going to be the 2-for-1 special. And then also the other thing is like the commenter I was talking about, if you have other children, what happens is the other children get very resentful. And part of the reason they're resentful is because all of your energy is going toward, in their mind, what they see is like the bad one. It's like, oh, we're over here being good, but you're obsessed about that. And then there's more you, and then it just, so when you decide to unplug, you can help shift the entire dynamic to everyone around you.
Yeah. And what person wants to be married to someone who is, who is living in that space of victim? And I think that's really probably, I felt like a victim, and in many ways we are, and I want to acknowledge that, but we get to choose. We get to choose how we're going to respond, how we're going to walk through this. And I took off my victim cape and I put on my Superman cape.
I love it.
Yeah.
And Pam, I know that you have coming up here, and I think just like 3 weeks or something, you have a women's retreat that's coming up that's designed to help people come back towards themselves. Is that right?
Yeah. So, one of the things as part of our organization, Thrive Family Support, we try to, bring things to the table, educational workshops, support groups. And I think, retreats really helped me. You get away, you unplug, you don't answer your phone, you're disconnected from all the things that are going on around you. Now, I know sometimes we feel like our person can't live without us, and I can assure you they will. So it's okay. It's okay to take time for yourselves to kind of get back to that place of peace and joy and get out of the chaos for a while and rediscover, who you really are and who you are created to be and what your purpose might be in life. So we love doing these retreats. We've done a few of them now, and And I'm in Minnesota. And Amber, I don't want to shock anyone when they go to our website and they're like, I'm not going to Minnesota, right? November. But we really don't live in the tundra, and the weather's very nice. And it's at a beautiful resort in Brainerd, Minnesota. It's about 2.5 hours from the city. So we have people flying into Minneapolis, and they're getting on a little shuttle bus and going up to the retreat center. And if you are from Minnesota, you know where I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Cragen's at Brainerd, in Brainerd. But we're going to have a whole weekend of just rediscovering who we are. We have a gal who does like beautiful coloring artwork, right? So we have her coming in and speaking about, like how that art and how coloring, there's an artist in all of us, and that's not my thing, but it's been so fun to just learn how to bring something like that out and how it eases anxiety and that kind of thing. So we just have a lot of really fun things planned, and we'll be outdoors for some of it, depending on the weather. But there's nothing that helped me more on this journey than detaching from, now I don't like using the word detachment very much, but we were detaching from the chaos. We were detaching from the negative environment. We were detaching from my victim mentality, and we were reattaching to our spiritual self, our, humanness, and who we really were meant to be.
Right. The whole time you're talking about it, in my mind, I'm seeing like a plug. It's an unplugging. It's like I'm going to unplug from this outlet, and I'm going to choose specifically where I'm going to plug back in. And so if you are a woman and you are needing to unplug from something in your life and plug into something better, this retreat might be just the thing for you. And it's not specifically, you don't have to have a son or a daughter struggling with an addiction. It's can be related to addiction in any way if it needs to be, but it doesn't have to be. This is just about how to come back to yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned that specifically, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people want to come with a friend, and maybe their friend isn't impacted by substance use, but maybe there's been other, hardships, or, I mean, gosh, if you're raising teenagers or if you have young adults, like, I mean, it's exhausting even without substance use. So, some of you are in a place where you're just tired and you've just sort of lost who you are, and you've lost your ability to laugh and have fun and find joy. This is just an opportunity, and it's actually really, really reasonable. We made it very affordable. So it's like for a double room, $275 a person. And that includes everything. That includes your food and your, lodging. And so we really do like to make it reasonable for people to be able to attend. That's part of our mission.
And I put the link in the chat here in case anybody wants to go to the website and look at that and learn more. And I'm also going to put in the chat, let's see if I can do two things at once here, Pam's contact in case you have any questions or anything like that. You can contact Pam to find out more about that. And Pam also has services, coaching services, and a free Facebook group, and all kinds of other resources. If you are a family member dealing with an addiction, she's a wonderful resource for that. So make sure you reach out to Pam.
Yeah, we work together well, Amber and I. There's
our philosophies are in alignment.
We both kind of are, work in that lane of craft and invitation to change, and really just bringing out the value, the human value in our loved ones, and creating an environment that supports recovery. And so this opportunity is for you to activate your return to wellness, spiritually, physically, mentally. And so invest in yourself. And I think that's the other thing, Amber, just it's an investment, and be okay with that, right?
Mm-hmm. And if you're watching this either live or on the replay, I want to invite you to leave in the chat or in the comments what you have done to help reconnect to your own self, because it always helps other people to either hear your story or to try things, because you look at that and you think, I haven't thought about that. I think that might help me. So make sure you share your own wisdom out there, because together, if we put our heads together, I know we have the answers in there. Thank
Mhm.
you so much, everyone who joined us. Up next, I'll have a video for you more about reconnecting to yourself and getting your life and your family back on track.